Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Boy Manning here. Welcome to a Thursday, second round NBA draft edition of the Garden Report. But first, we're going to look back on round one last night with Tyler Rucker here, who glad we were able to get on here at one point and discuss this thing. We didn't get to talk to you on this show leading up to it. I know Noah caught up with you on her You Got Boston podcast, and you guys talked about some prospects. I had a bunch of people on leading up to this thing, including some writers over on No Ceilings, who Tyler comes to us from here. And I don't think Hugo Gonzalez's name came up much at all. And I knew he was slated in that range, knew he was a possibility, but I was surprised to hear his name called yesterday, and I know a lot of fans were as well. So we'll spend a lot of the show talking about him, what he brings to the table, where he fits into Boston in the short and long term here. But I'm glad I looked into him a little bit, glad I watched a little bit of him going in the draft day. So I wasn't blown away by him and didn't know who he was and all that. I think a lot of Celtics fans probably came at it from that perspective, though. This is a young player who doesn't have a ton of experience and played in Spain. So everyone looked up and was like, who was this compared to some of the college players who were in play there?
Yeah, he's a bit of a mystery. It's always tough, for, I think, NBA fans for like, hey, you're drafting an international guy that didn't play a lot. So you don't have a lot of tape or film to watch of him. But, Hugo's been one of these names that was kind of buzzing the last couple of years when you talk to scouts and everything. And it was just in a tough situation with Real Madrid this year. Obviously, we can talk about it later, but I mean, the roster is just really impressive when you look at it. There's a lot of NBA players on it. And Hugo before this year, like coming into the season, you talk to some scouts and they're like, this looks like a lottery pick. And he had made some really impressive strides kind of playing with his age group, like in the Adidas Next Generation tournaments, which scouts are always, kind of flocking to. But I thought personally that Hugo was going to be off the board. I really did think he was going to be a pick that was probably going in that top 20, top 25 at worst. I thought Brooklyn might have taken it with one of those picks just to kind of be an upside swing. So I thought Boston, him landing there and them getting him, I thought was a fantastic haul for the first night.
Yeah, and I've heard a bunch of evaluators say that they saw lottery potential here for him, maybe like even top 5-10 potential with his, potential for the future that you're accounting for there. Why do you think he fell so far all the way to 28?
I think it's just always tough with some uncertainty. The lack of minutes, the lack of production is something I think scouts will get a little concerned by. And then you kind of asked around, and he was one of the names I was really curious leading up into the draft to talk to like different teams about. And a lot of evaluators like, hey, I saw him in person in practices this year and he looked fantastic. Middle of the year, he was barely playing. And I still had talked to like an executive that was like, I have him in my lottery. So it was one of those, like if you were on the ground seeing him in practice, I think you really got the full story. And like with playing with Real Madrid and that talented roster, yeah, he didn't get on the court a ton, but those practice reps, what he was around all year, I think that's something you can't underestimate. But he's measured much bigger than I think a lot of us were expecting. He's tough. He's physical. He has a relentless motor. I think he's going to match perfectly with Boston and what they're trying to kind of build. It's just a really good talent value at 28, excuse me. I'm always all over the place.
Yeah, and I want to hear more about his game because, again, didn't play a ton. Hard to pull much from the statistical output there. I know he played some international ball as well at some high levels when he was young. What is his game at this point when you look at it and when you talk to people? Where's he at right now, and where could he potentially go?
Yeah, this year with Madrid, he was kind of playing a little bit more off ball. He's kind of a crafty on ball guy that can create, gets downhill. He's around 6'7", so it was 220-ish, I think is what he measured at. So it was bigger numbers you weren't expecting. I was like, that's a good frame so far. Good wingspan, and then Hugo's like one of these high energy, just relentless motor, kind of madman on the court. He just flies all over. That's why like Boston fans are going to love him quick. He's kind of one of those guys that just flies out of nowhere for tip dunks. And I think right now you're really trying to be like, okay, he's got the defensive like nastiness, and he's composed on that side. He will just continues to bring effort. Like he will nonstop motor. It's kind of really fun to watch, especially even this year when he didn't get a lot of minutes. Like he was ready to go right when he got on the court. The outside shot is the thing that just needs to come along a little bit more consistent, but it's trending in the right direction. If you've watched it from a couple of years ago, he was more of a catch and shoot guy this year. Maybe that was a plan with them, but I think it was more just he was trying to figure out, how to get more minutes and stay on the court. But smart player that really doesn't take a possession off, and I think that's what you're going to want to build from, and it's a great thing to have with this, fit and Missoula and all that. They're going to love him.
For sure, and I get excited when I watch and hear about some of the stuff with him. Now, I was certainly looking at some other guys here, and the fact that they pick 32 today, I think leaves the door open to a lot of players that fans, media, whoever was interested in them taking certain people, they're still available for them to select here. So I think this draft for Boston could end up looking different if you have a guy who's a little more ready to go and Gonzalez in a long-term play there. But I was thinking more, all right, what's this team need right now? Obviously, centers are they're in short or supply of right now if Horford and Cornette leave. Porzingis out the door as well. Guards, I mean, this player seems more like a wing guard hybrid to me, at this point in his career, and certainly someone who might not play a ton this year where he's at in his development, I feel like. So I get some of the fan frustration with a pick like this, but then you start to think, all right, they're offloading a couple contracts here. Tatum's out this season. There's probably more of a long-term vision here with this team. And I don't know if that's why they made this pick and if they would have gone a different direction if they were still trying to compete for a championship here this year. But it makes sense to me in line with, all right, there might be some players who are older and ready to go now and can fill a role at this point. But where we're at as a team and where we're going, why not take a swing on a guy who might have star potential here? And this guy, to me, more than a Kalkbrenner or and any number of wings you could talk about at this position, feels like he has the ability to grow into something special more than some other players here.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think if Tatum doesn't get hurt, I think you could go in a complete different direction with that pick. But I think that's why I was also so intrigued coming into the draft for the Celtics stuff. Like, well, that 32 could get really interesting in a hurry, depending with this class. I was like, some swings ahead of the Celtics could make value fall down the board. So like Hugo was on the board, and I was like, okay, this is an interesting one. And then they turned the pick in so quick. So I was like, okay, well, they clearly were very excited to get him. Now at 32, it's like there's some nice talent still on the board. So I think you could get now like, hey, we dipped into the upside swing. Now let's try to get someone that could come in early, be a rotation piece, give us some depth, maybe some early contribution. But like Hugo with the time frame with the Celtics, like I'm starting to believe exactly like you, Bobby. I think you have a year now to be like, let's just let him develop. Let's get him reps. Maybe you put him in Maine, just be like, we're going to play you a bunch. Maybe you have him around the team just to kind of build some confidence. And then maybe you kind of just unleash everyone next year, because I think he also fits well with Shireman. If you can play them together, they have both a little bit of versatility. They're both tough. They're both physical guys. So you're getting some really fun pieces now, I think, in the rotation and overall depth. So I like what Boston did there. And then now at 32, you get the chance to get some really good value as well. A lot of names I thought would be going in the first round are still on the board.
Yeah, we'll get to the 32nd pick, which is coming up tonight just after 8 o'clock for the Celtics here. I believe Minnesota picks in front of them to start the second round. So, I mean, they'll have one of Kalkbrenner or Raynaud if you're looking for a center. There's a bunch of different wings and guards and stuff we've discussed there. So, still a good array of talent there. There's some interesting stuff that happened ahead of them in the first round. We'll get to that as well here with Tyler Rucker. But first, I want to hear from Brad Stevens, who talked about Hugo Gonzalez last night.
Yeah, we've been watching Hugo for a long time. He's obviously been on everybody's radar, I think, for a long time. And then, followed his year with a great Real Madrid organization and team and closely, and watched him in all the, U18s and those types of things. And just big fan of how he plays. He's tough. He's hard playing. He cuts. He goes after the ball. He competes. He's got all the intangibles of a winning basketball player. And there's things he can get better at, just like everybody else at that age. But competitiveness is not, it's at a high level.
Is the plan to bring him over?
Yeah.
Right away? And
All right. So yeah, there's Brad on that. He also went on to talk about all the cutting that he does. He mentioned cutting a ton in his assessment of Hugo's game. And that's interesting to me because there were two things that stood out to me most from Steven's press conference last night. And it was that and the skill set that Gonzalez brings to the table, along with the fact that the Celtics might alter their play style slightly next year to try to become less stagnant offensively when shots aren't falling or they're slowing down like they did in the Knicks series there. They don't cut a ton as a team. They played 5 out, obviously, the last handful of years because of their personnel. And I do think Joe Mazzulla is adaptable to different personnel and playing the strengths of different guys if they do have a new look roster this year. But they were 26th in cuts per game last year. And I think that stemmed from the fact that they wanted to space the floor. They didn't want the paint getting crowded. And so they shied away from having guys cut. And, the different cuts that are obviously aimed at pulling guys to different positions on the floor and that. He talked about the sacrificial cuts, all that. So there's different ways that they could use Gonzalez's cutting, certainly, that aren't built on setting him up to score. But that does seem to be a major part of his game and a different dynamic on the floor than the Celtics have had. They haven't had a lot of guys who cut to the basket a ton.
Yeah, with anything with Boston, I feel like fans, we get a little annoyed or irritated when it's like, okay, everyone's standing around, and that's not Hugo. He is constantly moving. He's really, really smart off the ball. He's just a really intelligent player for his age, like a really talented kid. I think he was probably high 90th percentile when you come to like synergy and advanced numbers as a cutter. So he's got bounce too. So when he cuts with purpose, and he's got quickness, and he's got that physical frame where like Hugo's not afraid to go at anyone. He's just got that fired up Spanish vibes, and you quickly fall in love with him as a player the more you watch, just because of like the heart, the motor. I mean, I love to see Stevens just kept saying he's tough and he cuts a lot. It's like, yeah, those are two important skills to have for a energetic wing. And like there is a lot of stuff with his game that needs to come around, but I just think with Real Madrid and playing around that type of roster, those veterans that have been overseas in the NBA, it's a great foundation, and this is a great piece to go. Like he's early on going to play with high energy, awareness, and defensive potential, and the motor's just always running with him. So I think it's a great piece to continue to build with, and you might be shocked that this is one of those that just sticks and is going to be here for a long time.
Yeah, and what are some of the improvement points with him? Obviously, the three-pointer isn't quite there yet. Not a ton of mid-range activity, it looks like, from him. Self-creation, not there either at this point. So I don't know if he'll eventually become a point guard, per se. But what are the things you think he can improve on, and what are some of the concerns you have about his game, if there are any?
Yeah, the shooting's the big one. You kind of watch his tape from before this year when he was a lot younger, and his shot looks good in the upper half, but it was kind of like the lower body might have a little bit of a turn. I thought it's gotten better now. It seems more consistent with like at least the foundation. It just needs some reps and consistency. So if you'd like to see that come around, and then he's got some wiggle as a creator, but it's more of just like you need to kind of improve that. Like sometimes he gets by people and has beautiful footwork with Euros and crafty finishes where you're like, okay, that's really impressive. But I think it's just that first trying to create the advantage off the bounce that's where you just, I think, see the youth and needing some time to develop on that. So all of his areas where I feel like he needs to get better is like, well, you can work with that. A staff will be really excited to get him in the gym and keep working on his craft. It's just the rest of the positives are really like a lot of stuff you just can't teach. Like the motor and the relentlessness is stuff. It's like, that's just on Hugo. So I think the shot and the handles aren't terrible. It's just the handles, like he just needs a little bit with like creating that first separation. But when he gets by you, he can really do some fun stuff with finishing and getting downhill, because that's when he lights up. Like he's electric getting above the rim and going at people.
I want to take a second here to tell the people about our sponsor. And I mess with my settings a little bit here. I lost some audio in my ear, but yeah, I'll do a read while we figure that out. Prize Picks, you know the deal. Over on Prize Picks right now, basketball is over, but still some great women's basketball going on right now as well this summer. Baseball, ton of stuff where all the stars are going to be out there. Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Caitlin Clark, Sabrina Ionescu. Those are all players you can look at and say, all right, what are they going to do tonight from a points perspective, assist perspective, home runs, hits, all the stats over there. And the best part about Prize Picks is you can combine your favorite sports to make your daily fantasy sports team, and they've made daily fantasy sports accessible. Love it. You just pick two players, pick more or less on their stat projections, and you have your team. So again, points, assists, rebounds on the basketball side, hits, home runs, walks, whatever projections you can think of on the baseball side of things. And I love baseball this time of year because it's going on every day. So go over to Prize Picks, see what they're projected to do. That's another thing I like to do during the basketball season, see what they think Jaylen Brown's going to score, or Peyton Pritchard, how many threes he's going to hit in a game. And you can go more or less on those projections to win up to 2,000 times your cash. And when you go over there and use the code CLNS, play $5, you'll get $50 instantly when you build your first lineup over there. Go to Prize Picks, download the app today. And if you play $5, you get $50 instantly with the code CLNS. You don't even need to win to get the bonus there. So Prize Picks, run your game. So let's see if I got my sound back here. Do I got you, Tyler?
Yeah.
All right. I'm sure the people can hear you. I might have to jump out here for a second, but I'll throw another question your way while I figure that out. Gonzalez, the other aspect I want to talk about with him is with the defense, because to me, when I'm reading the reports, when I'm watching, when I'm looking at some of the stats, that seems to be the exciting thing about him. And maybe the most translatable thing is the fact that he can guard a bunch of positions, be disruptive on that end, cover a lot of ground. He's got length, he's got size. So at the very least, you might be looking at a guy that can fill in some energy defensive minutes for you right now on a team that might need some minutes dealing with injuries or roster turnovers. It looks like the Celtics will here.
Yeah, I think the defense is what you want to buy in right away. I think the motor, his ability to kind of attack the on ball creation, like he's relentless with that. He's active, aware. He could be really, really good and competitive when getting around screens and trying to battle that way. So I think with Hugo, it's a full package. If anything, sometimes he can get in trouble because he's too aggressive with trying to get around screens and everything. So you got the full foundation of really good defensive upside with Hugo. Yeah, you can make the argument like, hey, maybe this could turn into a 3-and-D if the shot comes around consistently. But an active guy that just keeps coming after you on the defensive side of the ball. I know Evan Fournier they were playing against and was having a big game, and Real Madrid brought Hugo off the bench to be like, we need you to stop him. Like Fournier still gets shots because he's an NBA vet and he knows what to do, but you could watch that game and see Hugo just is smothering him and trying to do everything possible. So he's going to drive some NBA vets crazy because he just is a young kid with a lot of energy, and he's got the frame of a NBA vet. Like he's physical, he's got good length and good footwork, but it's a great foundation to work with when it comes to like teaching him on the defensive side of the ball, because he really can get after you when he's getting around screens, and he'll stay right on your hip. If anything, he might just be too pumped up about sometimes. So I think he'll be a fun one for Missoula and everything. And, you played the clip earlier from Brad. I love when coaches are like, oh, he's coming over. This isn't we're bringing Hugo. And I think that just tells you the type of kid he is and the type of talent he is.
So I'll ask for your comparison, and I did hear one last night that made me excited, and it was Christian Braun.
Yeah, that's a good one. You also start to see why it's like, okay, this is intriguing. This is a player that's going to stick for a long time. I've heard a little bit of Josh Hart, some vibes like that, and I like those a lot. There's some shades of Denny Avdia, but I don't think he's the offensive force that Avdia was. I think he's more of like the defensive, maybe the evil defensive version of him or something. But I think those are a lot of players you're throwing around. They're like, okay, I get it. Like that's a valuable piece in this league. It was tough coming into the year when Hugo was with Real Madrid, because I was like, oh man, he might not play a lot. So where is he going to end up? But I still think he had some of the most fascinating upside with this class, just because of what he can bring to the table early on, and then what you can potentially unlock.
Last question I got on him. How much would we see him year one, you think? And obviously it's going to depend on the roster and all that, but how ready is he to go in this league? You mentioned Maine possibly being part of the equation there. Like, is there a development curve, you think, to him playing that might take up to a year?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. And I'm just going off of kind of the track record with, Stevens and the Celtics staff and everything. I thought Shireman might have had a real shot to play a lot more last year just because of what he brought to the table. And quickly we found out it's like, oh, maybe he's a year two guy. So I think now everything's on the table with this team and how they're going to be playing. Maybe they're struggling a little bit and they're like, let's get some reps for the young guys. But I think Hugo will play a bit more than people are thinking, because he's going to be a perfect guy that when you need someone to step up, we're like, let's unleash him. He's going to run wild and give us some energy and give us some good minutes. So I think he'll be on the team and probably playing a little bit more than everyone's ready for. I wouldn't be shocked if he surprises some people at Summer League, because I think now he's just going to be like, let's unleash him and let him go wild.
Unfortunately,
is he not?
I did hear last night that he might not play.
Okay, well, that's smart, actually. Tough. That's really smart, because I know they won the title, I think, last night. Yeah, he was up at 5 a.m. So I'm really happy. I get scared when they play the international guy right away. So no, that's smart, but it just, I think, comes down to the roster. I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, you didn't get a lot of reps this year. We're gonna play you a ton in Maine just to be ready when Tatum gets back. We'll unleash you, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's on this roster and finds a way in the rotation, because he just brings a lot of good stuff right away.
Yeah, so Summer League feels unlikely based on Steven's comment last night. Though, again, you're playing up until this point in the year. You're, trying to sustain these guys a little bit. The silver lining, though, I'll say, is they have Eurobasket in August. And there's some international play coming up in Europe. So could he be part of that potentially? Like, that would actually excite me more than seeing him play in a couple Summer League games and then take a seat. I actually want to see him at the highest level of competition internationally again and see how he competes with some of the other stars who play over there. So I hope that ends up being the case. We'll see. That's, I think, late August into September. So that could be when we see Gonzalez next. But I found this interesting coming out of day one, and we'll talk about some of the other stuff that happened yesterday. But you like this as a landing spot for Gonzalez and put it among your favorites here. Did you expect this? Were you surprised as some Celtics fans, or did you see a connection between these two teams? And then certainly the fit here you think is strong.
I just saw that, like, hey, if there was a world, like when Boston got on the clock, I said, oh man, Hugo would make some sense here. And then all of a sudden I feel like I linked in. I was like, oh, picks in, like they love this pick. Because I'm like every Celtics fan, I'm expecting them to trade every time they're in the first round now. So when they turned it in quick, I was like, oh, okay, like they love this one. And I just thought for a player coming from a team like Real Madrid to go to the Celtics, who I think understand how to be patient and realistic with the development, and like, hey, this is our plan to kind of unlock you a little bit and build some confidence. I just thought with his skill set, the coaching staff, the front office, I was like, this makes a ton of sense for all parties. Because I think Hugo now just needs like, hey, he had a year where he didn't play a ton, and before he was a very exciting prospect. So now I think he's going to understand, okay, like I'm with the Celtics and they're going to probably not just play me all the time right away, but I understand what it means to be a pro. And I thought it was just a great landing spot for his skill and upside and what the Celtics need from him.
All right, Hugo Gonzalez to the Celtics with the 28th overall pick here. We'll take a look at the first round from last night, which did have a few surprises. No drastic moves up and down the board. There was one that was very surprising that I want to get your thoughts on briefly here. But I think the highlights of the night, obviously, Ace Bailey going to Utah after some uncertainty with where he would end up. There was the big trade up to 13 by the Pelicans, where they gave up a future Bucks pick next year to get Derek Queen. And then I think a lot of people were fascinated by Hanson Yang going to Portland at 16, when I think he was ranked by most people to go much later than that, though I did hear some love for him as well during this process. So what among those stood out the most to you?
The Hanson Yang one for me was just the biggest one. But I honestly, the Pelicans trading that pick was really close to it. But I thought Hanson Yang going that early, you know,
was it a little bit of a reach?
Yeah, for me, yes. I thought he was going mid-second round. I just was a little bit lower. Look, the offense is really special and fun, and he's gigantic. I've sort of tried to figure out today of like, okay, let's figure out what, you know, Portland was thinking here. And Hanson Yang was buzzing before, you know, the draft. Like this was a name that was very connected. I thought a lot of teams were like, hey, Brooklyn's really hot on that one. And everyone was thinking he's going to Brooklyn. He's going to Brooklyn. So in my head, I was like, well, Brooklyn was at 22 with all those
Everyone
picks,
else
so,
went to Brooklyn.
Yeah. So maybe they were eyeing it, and maybe Portland was just a little like, hey, we love him. We're scared to go back a little bit more. So, you know, I get it. When in doubt, go get your guy. But it was just one of those names where you kind of look down, you're like, wait, what? This is the real one. So Portland's building a team with some really good defense. Hanson struggles on that side of the ball, but his feel, size, and playmaking is undeniable. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it works out. But yeah, that was the big one that surprised me. And then the Pelicans just trading that pick to go up. I mean, I know getting Fears and Queen sounds really exciting, but that's a juicy pick they gave up. So it was just a wow, like that could be a potential top 5 pick, and you gave that up. So in a really strong class next year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works.
I love Sorber to the Thunder. I love Coward to Portland when I thought that's where he was going. I don't know about Memphis as much and what they're doing at this point, but I do love him as a player. I think he could end up being one of the better ones in this class here. Clayton to Utah, great stuff. Yep. I think those are two enormously talented players ending up there, and one of them potentially could turn into a star. But the other one I wanted to ask about, because he was connected to the Celtics, was Kasparis Jack Jonas. Ends up at 20. I feel like I feel like he was slated a little higher than that.
One of my biggest surprises probably of the night was that he fell to where he did. And of course he falls to the Miami Heat, because that's just what always happens. So Jonas is an interesting one. He had a really quiet pre-draft process. I got to the point where I kind of a scout like reached out to me, and he's like, hey, I want to ask you something. Have you heard anything on Jonas? And I was like, I haven't heard a word. And he's like, we can't hear anything. And so it was a quiet buzz, but you know, beginning of the year at Illinois, this was another guy that was really impressive before this year overseas with Hugo. They played at the same event, and he's 6'6", he's stocky, really smart floor general that has a little bit of positional versatility in the backcourt. But beginning of the college year, he was one of those guys that we were like, hey, this looks like a top 5 pick, because he was just on fire. And then he had a forearm injury on a shooting hand. When he came back, it just didn't look the same. Like he struggled a little bit, and then that Illinois team had like injury followed by this guy gets back, the next guy gets hurt immediately. They had like 3 straight of those, and it was like, oh man, they're just brutal. So I'm a little surprised he fell. It happens every year with the draft. There's just someone that kind of slips through the cracks, and it was coming into this draft, we were looking at like 10 and on. You get to a point of like, man, a lot of teams don't need point guards, and this is a deep point guard draft. And that was with Houston. It's still at 10. And then I was like, well, someone's going to fall because you're going to get to that range where it's like none of these teams need a guard, so they might go a different route. So I thought it was a great landing spot for him to get Miami. And it got to a point where I was like, well, if Boston really, they might be getting up there if they want to go get him. So I was kind of closely watching because I was like, you might be shocked if you can go get one of these guys. But I think Miami was ecstatic that he was there. And I had heard they really wanted Walter Clayton. So I think that was the buzz. If you want Walter Clayton, you got to get ahead of Miami. So.
Yeah, Miami's like players like that over the years, those slashing guards, Josh Richardson, Goran Dragic, those type of guys at the point. So I'm interested to see how that one's going to go because it usually does go well for their prospects. The other one, real quick, I'll ask for my co-host Jimmy, who was wondering about this one last night. Danny Wolf, how'd he end up falling to 27?
He, you know what was it was for months. It's been, you've asked around about Danny Wolf, and you get one team that's like, I love him, I have him at 13. And then you ask the next team, and they're like, I don't see it. I have him at 25. It was the one prospect this draft that it was just the eye of the beholder. Like some team would be like, oh, this will be fun, we see it. And the next team would just be like, I'm not sure. So I thought he had a really wide range where it was like, I could see him going late lottery. I could see him going middle of the 20s. I still thought when he was on the board at 27, I was like, this is late for someone like Danny Wolf because his playmaking, his feel, what Michigan asked him to do last year. Like they basically asked him to be the point guard, and he had some high turnovers, but it was also just a situation of like, you really asked him to do a lot, and awesome feel, really talented player. So I was like, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, he might be a Celtic. And coming into the draft, I was like, Danny Wolf would be my dream for the Celtics. And then it got to a point where I was like, Danny Wolf and Hugo are still on the board. Like the Celtics are going to get one of these guys. So I think if he was there, I wouldn't have been surprised still if it was Hugo, just because of the youth and the upside and the defense. But Wolf being in Brooklyn's interesting. I think they just only drafted playmakers last night, so it was a funny swing.
Yeah, unbelievable. Sarif, Wolf, Powell. I like that one for them.
Yeah.
No one,
Traore. Yeah. I mean, they drafted a bunch of guards, and then they got the defensive guy with Powell and ended it with a playmaking big. So it was just kind of funny. Like, oh, you got a lot of field guys and then a defensive upside guy. So
there's your first round. Interesting stuff last night. Nothing out of this world, but a few crazy things happened. And second round starts tonight at 8 o'clock. As we mentioned, Minnesota goes first. So we'll see. There's some chatter about teams moving up to 31. But when the Celtics are on the clock at 32, I have to think it'll be a center here, just given where they are at that position. And Brad did talk about the free agency processes coming up for Al Horford and Luke Cornett. Said that having both of them back is a priority for the Celtics, but they're going to explore some options this summer, and they don't begrudge them doing that if they want to look at some other stuff out there. So Celtics are going in a different way, stress the flexibility and resetting their asset pool and all that sort of stuff there. So I think you just got this strong message from Boston last night that they're probably going to be taking a little bit of a step back this season. So I think it makes perfect sense to bring in a developmental big, and I still have hope for Nemesh Keita. I thought he showed some real flashes last year with them, especially early in the season where he got consistent minutes. Fell out of the rotation for a little bit, and then toward the end of the year, you just didn't see him. So I hope they keep him around and keep trying to make it happen with him, despite some of his weaknesses. But I'd probably go with a big here. And, you know, we've talked about it, Tyler, a little bit. I think Ryan Kalkbrenner makes a lot of sense for their system. I think there's some buzz there around him and them. I think there's some connection there, certainly, and the possibility that he'll be available at that second pick. Maybe he goes right away, but I doubt that if it is Minnesota picking there. So if I had to guess who it's going to be, I'd say Kalkbrenner. I know Noah Penda was interesting there. Gonzalez probably fills that mold of a kind of developmental player who, does some stuff off the ball and defensive and all that. I think those guys would overlap a little too much. So I have to think it's going to be a big here. And if it is right now, I'm not crazy about him given the defensive limitations that I've read about, but the 3-pointer's intriguing there, and they're a team that loves to space the floor and play 5 out and all that. So I would at least understand it. And there's some other strengths to his game too. So those are the two that stand out to me. What are you looking at for them at 32?
Yeah, I think the last couple of years with the Celtics, I've been like, hey, eventually you're going to have to try to find some big help in the draft. And I thought coming into this, like Kalkbrenner should be a name that is at the top of their board, or they're at least looking at as like, hey, this is a realistic option for us. I think at 28, they probably had a lot of interest, but I had heard Phoenix had some interest too. And then that trade happens. And I think Boston's probably like, okay, well, now we got a potential suitor for Kalkbrenner off the board behind us. Maybe we can wait to get him at 32, and then Hugo falls down. So I think Kalkbrenner would be probably my pick. I think he's a great fit with like what you said, Bobby, like the system. Kalkbrenner could be great. He's a 4-time defensive player of the year in the Big East. He was 1-time defensive player in high school. Great length, surprising mobility. Like he's a good lob threat with good hands and a pick and roll. And I think he's probably much better as a drop big, but he shocks you with the fluidity. Like he can get around pretty quick for someone his size. So I'd like him there a lot. I'm in the same boat as you with Reynaud. I get the swing. I get the upside, especially with his floor spacing. But defensively, it just seems like maybe Kalkbrenner might be a better fit here. I would love Rasheer Fleming for them, but I think if Minnesota keeps the pick, it would be a little bit of surprise for me if Fleming's not that first pick.
Yeah, that would make a ton of sense for them, given the guys they brought in over the year. Terrence Shannon. Who did they trade? Did they pick someone in? Yeah, Asa Newell from Georgia. So, yeah, they love those wings, big wings there. Jaden McDaniels, defensive team. So I think that Fleming pick would make a ton of sense for them. I don't love the wings, and they fit in Boston. It would be interesting, though, if they want to fill that perimeter shooter spot. I know they brought in George Niang. We'll see if he ends up staying as well. But I do think if they were going to move on from Hauser tonight, you're maybe looking at a Kobe Brea or a Chaz Lanier. I know was in the building as well. But they might be able to get back into the second round at another point here tonight, because getting under the second apron allowed them to trade cash. And that's obviously something they haven't done for a little while here. So if you have some interest in moving into the 40s or maybe even the 50s, potentially, they can trade some cash for that and try to buy one of these picks. So I'd imagine some of those shooter guys would go a little bit later than 32. Is any you think fit for Boston potentially?
Yeah, I think Lanier would be an option. I'm with you. I think they go a little bit later than that. Kobe Brea for sure. I know Lanier has had some really good workouts. It's kind of been a name buzzing. Like he's been impressive. Some thought maybe he could be like sneaking into the very, very end of the first round. But he's definitely one you could keep an eye on there too. I think maybe they could get another pick later, but Elijah Martin would be someone that I really, really like. He would fit with what the Celtics, if they're trying to get
a lot of the
national.
evaluators seem to love him, despite him being consensusly ranked pretty low.
Yeah, he's scouts feel the same way. I've had a couple scouts just like light up, when I'm talking to them. They're like, "Oh, I love Elijah." So he's tough, can really play good length when it comes to his wingspan. He's like around 6'2", but he makes up for it with his length, and then he's got some explosiveness, and he's just nasty. So Elijah Martin, Javon Small, there's some good players on the board for sure if you're trying to find some stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if they try to get another one, or they just love a guy so much that maybe they try to take him instead. But I would be surprised if they don't go, get a big with one of this first pick that they have.
Yeah, and I'm happy with either of those guys. And those guys would obviously be the central focus at Summer League at that point. The Kalkbrenner thing is fun too, because he played 2 years with Shireman. Those guys will be playing together in Vegas this summer again. So I'm hoping it goes that way. I just love his game, and I like where it's going. I like how it's continuously improving, and it does just fit so well for Boston too. And the Cornet thing, I'd love for them to keep them. I know that's a priority for them, and he plays great with Tatum. And I think he's still, even though he's around 30 at this point, in the prime of his career, played his best basketball last season. He loves it here. I have to imagine they're going to find a way to make that work somehow. But if it doesn't, that's the skill set you're looking for in one of your depth bigs. And he'd probably be, at least compared to Gonzalez, more ready to go right away, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're getting someone like Kalkbrenner, it's like, hey, they got our backup big right away to help out. And I think it is some valuable insurance for if you lose Luke. And I know they probably would love to have Luke back, but you also get to a point where you look at numbers and you're like, hey, we just can't make it happen now, especially with the apron stuff. So Kalkbrenner, I think, would just be, I've kind of thought the whole time, like, this is a perfect fit if Kalkbrenner could land here just because of what he does. And I think at worst, he's a fantastic rotation big that plays for a long time in the league. And maybe you get a little bit more. Maybe this is someone that you can, have as a spot starter. So I think it would be a great fit. And the Shireman thing doesn't hurt, with the connection. So it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, I think Celtics fans would be very happy if he ends up here.
Yeah, and the Athletic did like a free agency value article on the centers in this class, and the numbers do blow you away when you look at them. And this isn't what these guys can necessarily go out and get in this market, which is tricky for free agents. But just from a value standpoint, what they did last year, they have Al Horford at $19 million a year. They have Luke Cornet at $14 million a year. So at least compared to those value numbers, and I know they probably can't go out and get that. It'd probably be like 13, 14 for full mid-levels. They'd be taking massive discounts to stay in Boston. And maybe that works for Horford at this point in his career. Maybe Cornet, he did it last summer. Would Cornet do it again, at least over a long-term deal? Have some security there, even on smaller numbers. I think that's what it takes. And that's asking a lot for guys to do, especially for a team that might not be super competitive. So I do think you're starting to get a little worried about losing at least one of those guys at this point with where the Celtics are financially. So a center makes all the sense in the world tonight. I think it's always good to have a developmental center in the pipeline. I think every team pretty much should, because those guys take a little bit longer sometimes.
Yeah, those are the numbers I feel like when I was trying to look at Luke, like, oh, what could they ask? I was like, oh, they're probably asking around that 15 spot, but you gonna get them to take that big of a discount? So it was just tough because I was like, man, they're in a tough spot to pay that. And I just think this is the new way of the league. Like, you have to be like, okay, we've got to draft guys. We've got to get some developmental bigs to help us out. So right there with you. It's gonna be really interesting. I hope they don't lose both, but I think Boston just has to prepare for some backup.
For sure. And it begins tonight. Another important draft pick for the Celtics, second overall in the second round here. So we'll know pretty quickly who they're going to be going with here. I want to do a couple more shout outs. First for LinkedIn, check out LinkedIn, because as a small business owner, you don't have the luxury of clocking out. Your business is on your mind 24/7. So when you're hiring, you want a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that hiring partner is LinkedIn Jobs. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in, and they make it easy to post your job, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates quickly. Their new feature allows you to write job descriptions, and quickly you get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. Either post your job for free or pay to promote. Promoted jobs get 3 times more the qualified candidates. And at the end of the day, the most important thing for your small business is the quality of candidates. And with LinkedIn, you feel confident you're getting the best. 72% of small businesses, according to LinkedIn data, say that LinkedIn helped them find high quality candidates. You can add a hiring frame, your profile picture, and get twice the qualified candidates. Let your network know you're hiring, and find out why more than 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring today by going over to linkedin.com/garden. That's linkedin.com/garden to post your job for free. linkedin.com/garden. Terms and conditions apply. And I want to shout out the great team you guys have over there at No Ceilings, Tyler. The draft guide, still super useful as you start figuring out over the next couple hours here, who teams are going to be moving forward with, who's playing at Summer League for these different teams a couple weeks from now. You can still use that draft guide to go over there and see what these players are made of. And I love relying on guys like you through this process because you watch them all year, you follow them for years, and just bring some awesome insight. So appreciate all the help you've given us here at CLNS Media, preparing for this draft here. Because again, we're head down looking at the Celtics all year, and then the draft comes around. We're like, all right, who are these people? So appreciate that a lot, and continue the great work over there with your guys.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me out. We love talking this time of the year to the NBA writers because you guys are so good throughout the year. We're reading your stuff, and then all of a sudden it flips, and we're like, we love to talk to the NBA folks. So thank you so much for having me on, Bobby. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and once again, Hugo Gonzalez was the Celtics pick at 28 last night, and they are picking 32nd at 8 o'clock. We will be live just before 8 o'clock leading up to the pick, reacting to it. We're going to hear more from the Celtics front office tonight as well. Mike Zarin, their assistant GM, speaking to the media here about the direction, some of these prospects. I'm sure there'll be a lot of good conversation with him. So stay tuned for that as well. And the free agency process begins on Monday. So we'll have a quick breather this weekend, I'm sure. There could be some other moves and activity for the Celtics tonight, even though there wasn't on night one. It feels like more payroll reductions coming here. So whenever that happens, we'll be going live instantly. So turn the notifications on as well. Subscribe, CLNS Media Celtics All Access. And appreciate Tyler again for being here today. We will talk to you all at 8 o'clock tonight. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Peace.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's
Yeah.
slide Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke